Welcome to Community Keynotes. This program was recorded live at the Fairfax County Public Schools 2015 Leadership Conference held on the campus of George Mason University. In this program, Daniel Horgan discusses the key components of effective strategic leadership with an audience of instructional and support leaders from the school system.
All right, so strategic leadership, that's the topic. What is it? Why is it important? Is it just a set of buzzwords that we're talking about for the next 60 minutes together, the theme of a conference? Why is it so important to organizations, to teams, to individuals? Marianne Williamson and Nelson Mandela have been credited with the following statement. Our greatest fear is not that we are weak. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond all measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us most. As a strategic leader, well, hold up. Before I give you the answers, I have a question for you. Raise your hand if you've ever had a manager in your career who you would identify as just a fabulous manager. Somebody who you know has your back, is looking out for your best interests, who's helping you grow and develop as a professional. Raise your hand if you've had a fantastic, amazing manager. If they're sitting right next to you, go ahead and shake their hand and say thank you. All right, now the flip question is this. How many of you have had the opposite? How many of you have had terrible managers that when you think about your professional development, they didn't necessarily have your back, they weren't necessarily looking out for your best interests, and over time you started to realize that you really weren't going anywhere under their leadership? Raise your hand if you've had that type of management experience. Right. So I want you to look at your seat number real quick. So look down at your seat number. If you have an even number, what I want you to do is to grab your packet, and on the top of the first page where it says heroes and villains, we're going to do a quick exercise. If you have an even number on your seat, what I'd like you to do is to take the next 60 seconds and to brainstorm as many positive characteristics in the heroes column that you can think of when it comes to positive strategic leaders that you have encountered in your career. Now, if you have an odd number on your seat, what I want you to do in the next 60 seconds is the other column. So think about all of those leadership villains, those people that didn't have your back, right? That weren't looking out for your best interests, and I want you to brainstorm some of the characteristics that you would associate with those folks that held you back versus propelling you forward. What were some of the characteristics that you guys wrote down on your sheets? Forward thinking, empowering, supportive, trustworthy, fair, providing constructive criticism. Two more. Collaborative. What was it? Candid. All right, so gave you candid feedback. All right, so flip to the other one. Raise your hand if you had an odd number seat. All right, so what are some of the characteristics that you wrote down for those that you would term not so helpful in terms of their management leadership? Insecure leaders, self-centered, critical, inflexible, isolated. What was it? Micromanager. Two more. One more. Reckless and lack of empathy. All right, so here's a question for you. This quick little exercise, it took us 60 seconds to identify the characteristics of both the leadership heroes, those who propel us forward, and the leadership villains, those who hold us back, right? And I asked you to raise your hand, those who have had successful leaders and those who had people that held them back. And most of you raised your hand for one of those two. So the question is, if we know what great leadership looks like, what strategic leadership looks like, and we know what bad leadership looks like, why is it so hard to lead strategically? Why is it so hard for individuals, for teams, and for organizations to be strategic in their leadership if we know what it takes to be an effective leader? Who has an idea? So personality clashes within the team is one. So when leaders are working with other leaders, they won't take other leaders out. What else? Way back there. It's really hard, right? Being a leader is not an easy task to do. It's something that's complicated, something that's challenging. You're going to run into roadblocks and hurdles and all of that every single day when you step into those leadership shoes. And sometimes you're going to make great decisions, and you're going to face great consequences. And in other moments, you're going to be that leader that makes the wrong decision, right? and you're going to have to face the consequences of those decisions. So the reality is we all know what great leadership and what bad leadership look like, right? What I'm here today to talk to you about is essentially 3 core ingredients to what I believe strategic leadership is all about. Through my own experience, running nonprofit organizations, working for a large Fortune 500 company, and then going out on my own to run my own business, traveling around the country, working with youth and adults around leadership development. Those 3 things that I'm going to highlight is, number 1, self-awareness. I believe at the core of any successful strategic leader, we have to know who we are and be comfortable in our own skin so that every day we can show up in the most authentic way possible. Number 2, I believe that with that core in place, then and only then can we build solid, meaningful relationships that we can manage and ultimately sustain for the long term. Once we have those successful, meaningful relationships established, then and only then can we drive influence in teams, organizations, communities, and beyond. So self-awareness, relationships, and influence are going to be the 3 things that we focus on. So if you would, take your packet. On the very first page, below where it says heroes and villains, you'll see a list of values. There's 15 values listed there, and if you don't have a packet, they're up on the screen as well. They might be a little bit hard to read. So if you are around a packet and can grab it, that would be great. I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and what I'd like you to do is, on that list of 15 values, what I'd like you to do is to rank your top 5 values out of that list of 15. Now, first and foremost, let me just say that I know there's a lot more values other than just these 15. But using just this list of 15, what I'd like you to do is to rank the 5 that are most important to you, 1 through 5. So we're looking down the list of our 15, and we're ranking the top 5, the 5 that we feel are most important to us. I'm going to do a quick exercise where I'm going to ask you to stand if you would rank the following values in your top 5. The first is helping others. Take a stand if helping others is one of your top. All right, grab a seat, thank you. The next one is working with others. Take a stand if working with others is in your top 5. So working with other people, working in a collaborative environment, grab a seat. Next one is working alone. If working independently on your own is one of your top 5 values, go ahead and stand up. All right, grab a seat. The next one is competition. If competition is one of the values that drives you, go ahead and stand up. It's in your top 5. All right, grab a seat. Next one is make decisions. Go ahead and stand up if making decisions is one of the values that drives you. Great, grab a seat. Next one is influencing people. In your top 5. If it's in your top 5, go ahead and stand up. Influencing other people. Great, grab a seat. Next one is knowledge. If knowledge is one of your top 5 values that drives you each day, go ahead and grab a seat. General creativity, so being creative, innovative in the work that you do. If that's some of the values that drive you, stand up. Okay, grab a seat. Supervision. If being in that management or supervisory role is something that drives you in terms of a value in your top 5, go ahead and stand up. Okay, grab a seat. Next one is change and variety. If you like lots of change, lots of variety, not being stuck in the same routine, go ahead and stand up in your top 5. Grab a seat. Precision work, so attention to detail. If it's a value that really drives you in your top 5, go ahead and stand up. Okay, grab a seat. Stability. If stability is in your top 5, being in a stable position, knowing where you're going to be tomorrow. All right, grab a seat. 3 more, recognition. If recognition is in your top 5, values that drive you, being recognized for the work that you accomplish. Grab a seat. Fast pace. If fast pace, culture, or environment is important to you as a value in your top 5, go ahead and stand up. Grab a seat. And the last one is a financial gain. If financial gain, financial security, or independence are in your top 5, go ahead and stand up. All right, grab a seat. So why did I ask you to rank your values in listing your top 5 out of the 15 that are listed there? What are some of the reasons why that's an important exercise to do when we start talking about self-awareness and our own personal brand, how we show up as leaders? Being aware. What about motivation? It tells you what motivates you. It tells you, and all those people around you, the lens through which you see the world, right? So when you look through this list and you identify all these things, helping other people, working independently, being creative, being detail-oriented, that's your natural instinct, right? It's where you lean in terms of getting your energy, getting your motivation, feeling empowered, feeling engaged, right? So understanding your own values enables you to do what in your career? Focus on your strengths, but what else? It focuses you on where you need to show up, right? If you value in your top 5 the idea of working independently, are you going to go seek a position in a team that is 100% based on teamwork and group dynamics and constantly collaborating with lots of internal and external stakeholders? Not likely, right? But some people end up in those positions, right? And then there's a value clash. So when we think about ultimately defining our self-awareness, one of the key things to consider in terms of our personal brand is our value system. Our value system being the filter or the lens through which we see the world. And as we collaborate in our schools and across the district and across our communities, taking the time to understand what other people around us value sets us up for success. In what tangible ways, when you're working with a team, understanding values, how does that play out in the way that you work with your colleagues? Tangible ways that values come into play in your teams. Think about the various fields that exist within the district, right? So you have IT fields, you have HR fields. Think about the black box and all of the introductions you saw. Some of the things that you noticed were there was different types of personalities, different types of characteristics, right? That came across in that black box, and the way that people chose to introduce themselves, right? All of that relates back to the values through which they see the world. So if you recognize in working with people that they value the details, as managers, as strategic leaders, you seek out the opportunities to put those people in positions where they can excel, when there's an alignment with the values, right? And it's almost like a microcosm. So if you think of an upside-down triangle, at the bottom is sort of the core of your team. And as you go from your team to the organization, from the organization to the community, from the community to the broader region or state or national level, the alignment with your values is going to become even more important to put you on the path to success and enable you to be a strategic leader that can work with diverse people, right? One of the challenges that we talked about when it came to the leadership villain, somebody who's not successful in being a great manager, is that they can't work with different personalities. Getting to know the values behind the people that they term difficult is one of the first steps in being able to break down the barrier that may exist and work on building a much more effective relationship, right? If you flip your page in your workbook to the top of the page, there's 4 different characters at the top. Looks like this. Now, how many of you in your careers have had mentors that have helped propel you forward, that have helped challenge you and push you in ways that you just didn't think that you were capable of going, right? Lots of us have had mentors. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about, over the next 60 seconds, a few key influencers in your life. People that I term your tribe. The people around you that play a variety of roles. They could play the devil's advocate. They could play the listening ear. They could play the person that you turn to when you're faced with challenges because they're a great problem solver. They could be that creative spirit that when you've tried and tried and tried multiple times to overcome a challenge, you just can't make it. You turn to that person, and that person helps you to see something you're not seeing, to think outside of the box. So take a few minutes and just think about who are those key influencers in your life right now. And put below the individual character their name, and in the body of the character, what I want you to think about is what it is about them that is most influential. Devil's advocate, great listener, creative spirit, problem solver. So take a few minutes and think about who are those key people in your life right now that are your key advisors, if you will. All right, I'm curious, as you've shared the people that are influential, on your list, right? I'm sure you could probably think of a lot more than maybe the 2, 3, 4 people that you've listed down on the handout. All right, so I'm curious, what are some of the reasons that you shared with your partner about why these people that you've listed are influential in your lives? They ground you. How do they ground you? So they maybe bring you back to reality when sometimes you're drifting outside of the reality zone. All right, great. What else? Different perspectives. So a perspective that maybe didn't come naturally to you, they challenge you with. What else? Absolutely, because they're different from you, they had different experiences, they have different value systems potentially. One more. They're problem solving. How do they problem solve? So we all face these really big problems, and we face the really little ones, right? And we have people in our lives oftentimes who can take the really big problems, and they can start slicing and dicing it apart to make it so compartmentalized that we start to figure out the stepping stones that we need to get to in order to solve the much bigger problem, right? So why do we do this exercise called our tribe? Why do we identify the people in our lives that are really the influencers around us when we talk about self-awareness? So in some cases, they help complete us. So those areas in our own lives where we maybe fall short, they help challenge us. They help fill in the pieces of the puzzle that potentially we don't have. What else? So you can emulate. So you have role models that you can look up to in terms of their leadership, right? Many of you raised your hand and said you have mentors in your life or have had mentors in your life, right? Thinking about what makes them a mentor. What are the characteristics? How do they demonstrate patience with you? How do they really challenge you? How do they push you in moments when you think, hey, I'm good. I'm right here where I need to be. I come to work every day, I check in, I do what I need to do, I leave, and I know at the end of the week I'm going to get my paycheck, right? And they make you realize that you can do more, you can do bigger, bolder things, right? So in terms of understanding who we are at our core, if you want to be a strategic leader, and not just lead yourself, but lead a team and lead an organization and ultimately lead beyond an organization to really create change in the world in which we live, part of self-awareness and understanding our personal brand is first understanding the core values that guide our decisions, then help inform our ultimate points of view, our perspective. You need to understand the people in your life that are influential in both positive and not so positive ways, right? When I was in college, one of the things that I was often told by career counselors was you need to go to as many networking events as you can possibly go to. Now, at that time, I was much more of an introvert. Somebody, the idea of going into a room of complete strangers and walking up to them at a cocktail reception or whatever and introducing myself and just starting a conversation was not something that I wanted to do, and in fact, it was something that I really dreaded. So oftentimes, I would just ignore that advice, and I'd say, I don't get the point of this networking. You go to these events, you sort of stand around, nobody really knows what they're doing or what they're ultimately there for. It wasn't until later in my career where I had a great mentor who said it's not about networking, it's about networking with a purpose. See, just networking is just making lots of connections without having any understanding or real clue around why we're making those connections, how we're going to use those connections, right? Or leverage those connections in our lives. But networking with a purpose challenges us as strategic leaders to say, what do I want to accomplish? Where do I want to go? What am I trying to do? Who are the people that I need to bring into my group of advisors? Nonprofit organizations and for-profit businesses have boards of directors, boards of trustees. They have advisors. Many of us don't have that as individuals. Strategic leaders do, right? Many times people refer to them as their mind group. It's that group of people that help complete you, that help push you and challenge you and think differently based on the experiences that they've had. It takes two flints to make a fire is a great quote to think about when thinking about who are the people as a strategic leader that you need to have around your table. Whether you're leading your team at work, you're trying to lead your family, you're trying to create balance in your life, who are the people that are going to help get you there, right? So right below those four characters, there's 6 puzzle pieces. How many of you have ever had in your life what I term a defining moment? That experience that when you're done with it, you sort of take a step back in the debrief and you're sort of like, that was an aha moment. I learned something about myself that I didn't realize I had within me. How many have ever experienced that type of a situation? So take a few moments, and on those puzzle pieces, I want you to brainstorm up to 6 experiences that you have had in your life that you would term defining moments. Things that have helped bring awareness to who you are as a person, that have helped to shape the type of leader that you are today, the type of person that you show up to your family, to your colleagues, and to your community. Think through a few of those defining moments that you've had in your life. And go ahead and write one down in each of the puzzle pieces that are on the workbook. Our defining moments are unique to us, right? The defining moments that we have jotted down on our sheet, although somebody may have put down, completing college, or getting this job, or getting this promotion, or getting married, or achieving some big personal goal, running a marathon, whatever it was, somebody else may have listed the same thing, but what it means to us, the story behind that defining moment is unique to each and every one of us. So when we think about our personal brands in terms of how we show up, the values, number 1. Number 2, the people around us, the influencers that are helping to shape our leadership, right? Help to open up and put the mirror in front of us and show us who we really are at our core. The 3rd, the defining moments, those experiences that each of us have had, those growing moments that have challenged and pushed us, those moments that we have celebrated in our lives are the stories that oftentimes we keep within. Strategic leaders reach within themselves and bring to the surface those defining moments, and they share them as powerful storytellers. Why? Why do they share their own personal experiences as a strategic leader? What is it? To motivate people, absolutely. Why else? To humanize themselves. It doesn't matter what the title is you have, how long that title is, how short the title is, where you are in the rank, what number you have assigned to you in payroll, where you are in terms of your age, where you are in terms of your skill set or your experiences. What matters is that we're all human and we have a desire to be the best version of ourselves. And if we put that lens on as strategic leaders, we recognize that for some people that's more challenging. Other people who have a great sense of confidence can step right into those shoes and can march forward and accomplish whatever task they put themselves up to. Other people need that lift behind them. They need somebody to challenge and encourage them and motivate them and push them, which is where our tribe comes into the picture, right? So right below those 6 pieces, we have something called a strength statement. How many, just with a quick show of hands, have ever read or heard of Marcus Buckingham? Any of his books? So Marcus Buckingham worked for years at Gallup. He was made famous, I would say, from his book written, Go Put Your Strengths to Work. And what he focused on through all of his research and looking at organizations of all different sizes and leaders around the world was understanding how organizations can propel themselves forward in achieving their mission and achieving their visions by focusing not on their weaknesses and trying to solve for that, but instead focusing on their assets, the strengths that they have as people, as teams, as organizations. And once they identify them, that's not enough. How do you put them to work, right? So years later, after he wrote that book and he was traveling all around, being invited all over the place to give talks about strength-based approach at work, one of the things that he realized was very similar to what I just outlined in terms of defining moments. We know them in our head. We may take the time personally to reflect on them, but we oftentimes go like this, right? And we keep them inside. Same is true with our strengths. You know what strategic leaders do? They pull it out of you. Why do they pull it out of you? Because they want to get the best version of you showing up on the team every day. And sometimes that's really hard and it looks really ugly, but it is so important for teams and for leaders to be successful. So how do you do that? Well, here's a tip. You create a strength statement, right? A strength statement is your opportunity to tell the world where you get your energy, what drives you, what motivates you, what excites you, what gets you up out of bed every day onto your feet, ready to go to work, what makes you lean in whatever task is given to you, right? Your strength statement is the opportunity to tell the world, I gain strength in doing X. Now, some of you might think in your head the same that I did when I heard this whole exercise. I said, well, that's kind of cheesy. You write this strength statement. Here's a question. How many of you have ever done Myers-Briggs? How many of you have ever done the personality assessments where you come up with the different letters that tell you the type of personality and leader you are? Or the color, the personality compass, or any of those tools, right? How many of you, after you've done those with your team, then have it somehow associated on your name placard or somewhere on your desk, or in the meetings that you're in, you talk about, oh, you're being so green right now. I wish you'd be a little bit more red. How many of you have had those experiences, right? Right. So the same is true with our strengths. If I know that my strength is that I can be a creative problem solver in any situation, give me the context and I will work with you to come up with a solution, and I will not stop until we come up with one. As my manager, how are you going to deploy me at work? You're going to put me in positions where I can be a creative problem solver. If you get your strength, we had a few people that stood up for the detail side, right? The value. If you get your strength and your energy and you get really motivated by the idea of being detail-oriented, right? I find my strength in being the person who creates detailed project plans for the team. As a manager, how am I going to engage that individual? They're the ones that are going to create the detailed project plans, right? If you're the type of person who gets motivation and energy from coaching people, from inspiring people, as a manager, how am I going to engage you in the team? You are my culture king or queen. You're the one who's going to drive the culture in our organization, within our department, within our network, right? So the only way that you can be put into a position where your strengths are coming out, are being played to every day, is for you to have an open, transparent, and confident conversation with your colleagues, with your management, with your department head, around where you get your strength and energy, right? There's 3 words that I'd love for you to write down. Awareness drives action. Awareness drives action. How many of you have ever been in a situation, particularly with kids, where you've interacted with a kid that might say, you know what, I'm really interested in the film industry, and I'd love to go into a career in the film industry. What's typically the first thing that comes to mind when some kid tells you that? Once you get past the idea maybe of it not happening, what is the other thing that comes to mind? What is it? Actor, actress. But personally, it's a human instinct for us to start to think. We go through the Rolodex in our heads. Who do I know that's in the film industry? Who do I know that's been down that path before? Right? For many of us, it's a natural human instinct to want to help somebody, right? Somebody comes into work and they say, had a really bad weekend, they got news that their parent was diagnosed with cancer, and they're really struggling as a family. Natural human instinct is what? How can I help you? What can I do for you? Right? So why is all of this so important when it comes to personal brand? The defining moments, the experiences that we have, are the stories that make us who we are. If we share our stories and we tell people where we get our strength, we invite them in to the rawest form of ourselves. And people don't do that naturally because it's uncomfortable and it's scary. And just like Carrie mentioned, in some moments, we face that fear factor. And especially as kids, when you think about really, really young kids who have no concerns in the world and they just go after everything in front of them, and as they get older and they go into middle school, into high school, and then into adulthood, there's all these more lenses that we start looking through, right? There's a whole lot more that we start evaluating things through, the judgments that we're going to face. That voice inside of our head gets louder. Our personal brand as strategic leaders can only grow and develop if we get comfortable in the skin from which we have. If you start to understand what your values are that drive you, the lens through which you see the world, you understand who's influencing you and pushing you forward, you understand at the end of the day the experiences that have shaped you, you get to the point where you're open and transparent about your strengths. The 5th and final version of personal brand is the attitude, the motivation, the willpower behind it to drive it forward. You see, there's this gap between one's desire for change and the action that's taken to change. We all have heard the expression, the cliche, talk is cheap, right? You can talk a lot about it. You can talk a good game. You can keep complaining. But what are you going to do about it, right? So as strategic leaders, it's not just about gaining the awareness of the people that are sitting in front of you, eager for your leadership. Strategic leaders seek out the opportunities to close the gap between individuals and teams' ability to move from the desire to change and the actual action that's going to get them there. They close that gap so they can move it forward. Gallup did a study in 2012 around the world that looked at what is our workforce like in terms of engagement. And they came up with a crazy statistic. In their study in 2012, 87% of employees around the world reported being disengaged in their current jobs. Financially, the impact of that statistic just here in the United States is $500 billion of lost productivity of people going to work every day feeling disengaged in the roles that they're in. Strategic leaders hear that, and they get that fire underneath them to show up and get the right people in the right seats motivated to do the jobs that they were born to do, to put them into positions of strength, to put them into positions that give them opportunities to create and establish defining moments, right? So strength statements is pretty simple to develop. You pick a verb. What is it that you get your strength from? You drill down to as specific as possible, and then you feel it. If I were to say I get my strength in being creative, creative doing what? Creative painting a picture, creative cooking a fabulous meal, creative coming up with a digital arts project, creative in shifting the culture of a school, creative in coming up with IT solutions that are going to solve the challenges that principals face across our district. Creative how? And then when you read that statement back to yourself, you ask yourself, do I really get energized when I read that statement? And if you don't get pumped up and energized when you read it, it's not done yet. It's not fully baked. You've got to be able to read it to the point when you're sitting with your manager or sitting with your colleagues and you say what you're finding your strength in, it brings you to life in a way that you can see it in your body language, you can see it and read it on your face. That's what self-awareness is all about. Those 5 core ingredients. Understanding and being clear about your value system. Understanding who the influencers are in your life and who might be missing that you need to get so that you can network with purpose. Understanding the defiant moments that have shifted you onto a different path. Understanding the strengths and how those strengths come to work. And at the end of the day, what's the attitude, what's the will, what's the motivation to get you there? Daniel Pink, anybody read his book, Drive? Yep. For some reason, this is not advancing. But in your workbooks, there's an image of the book, Drive. So in his book, he talks about way back, there used to be this sort of carrot and stick philosophy, right? So what motivates people? What gets people excited and out of bed? This idea of like, oh, if you do this, you'll get this, right? Well, in all of his research, what he started to understand was that it's not that simple. And it's no longer that way, right? People want a few additional things. Number one, they want autonomy. So in the boxes next to where it says drive, the first box is autonomy. They want to direct their own decisions. How many of you wake up every day and say to yourself, you know what, I want to go to work today, and I want somebody to tell me detailed instructions on everything I do. I want them to tell me how to pull my chair out, how to sit down, how to turn my computer on, how to go get lunch, what to eat. How many of you wake up and say that to yourself? Right. So managers fall into the trap of doing just that. Managers are more on that villainous side because they haven't quite figured out who they are. They don't have the confidence to be successful in those roles, will dictate to other people how to do their work, right? So a challenge as a strategic leader is to think about how do you bring to bear the right framework to get which you give people so that they have autonomy within that framework. You clarify for them the vision, the big picture, where you ultimately want to go, right? if one of the 4 core values of Fairfax County Public Schools is a caring community, a caring culture, right? And you put that out there into the world and you provide strategies and suggestions on how to get there, and you give people the flexibility to decide how they're going to create a caring culture within their schools, within their teams, within their departments, within the district as a whole. How are the bus drivers going to create a caring culture when those kids step onto the bus first thing in the morning? How is security, when a kid walks through a school door, going to create a caring culture for that kid? When IT is working hard on problem solving a big IT issue that has happened across the district, how do we create a caring culture in the midst of a big conflict? Right? You give people the parameters and you give them the opportunity to be autonomous within those parameters. The next piece, in terms of not just the autonomy, but the mastery. The second box is mastery. Every one of us wants to master what we get strength from. We want to look at the giant puzzle that exists as our teams and organizations, each of us representing a piece of that puzzle, and we want to know that our piece brings value to that team. We want to know that if I don't show up for work tomorrow or next week or the following week, it's not that you can be replaced down the road, but there's something different about the way you do what you do. There's something unique about the strengths that you bring to your team. We want to know that we've mastered something and we bring that to the work that we do, right? So you've got autonomy, you've got mastery, and the third box is purpose. We need to know when we go to work or we tackle whatever we tackle in our lives that it's bigger than ourselves. We need to know that it's not just about fixing the IT issue. It's not just about making sure that the buses run more efficient or more on time. It's that upside down triangle again. How does my work impact the next team, which impacts the organization, which impacts the community? When buses are out of sync, what happens? Kids show up late to school. The whole schedule is thrown off. Teachers don't have the time that they need to teach what they need to teach in the classroom. Principals are problem solving and therefore don't have the time or the capacity to focus on the challenges that they have. Parents are scrambling to get to work after figuring out how to find an alternative route for their kids to get to school. The trickle-down effect is such an important part of strategic leadership. Strategic leaders zoom out, understand the big picture, and zoom in and back out multiple times to understand what are the changes, what are the decisions, what are the steps that they need to put into place when something triggers X, they've got plan B immediately stepping in, right? Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. As strategic leaders, if you can give people the space to make their own decisions, challenge them to master something they find strength and value in, and show them the bigger purpose, you will deliver a much more successful workforce and team culture, right? Which moves us to the next part of the equation. That was all self-awareness, right? The next part is all around the idea of relationships. So real quick, I'm going to ask you to put down your pens, put down underneath your seat the workbooks, and stand up for a moment. I'm going to ask you very quickly to partner up with the person to your immediate right or left. This is a 4-minute challenge, and here's how it works. Each of you has 2 minutes to teach the other person something that they do not know, but that you know. So you have 2 minutes to teach them something. It can be your favorite recipe. It can be their favorite lyrics to your song, favorite directions to your restaurant. Whatever it is, but something that they do not know. 2 minutes each. I'll call the time at 2. Go. All right, 2 minutes is up, so you need to switch roles. Switch roles now, so the other person who is learning is now teaching. All right, so I'm very curious, very quickly, if we could hear, sort of popcorning around the room, what were some of the things that you guys learned from the partners that you were with? How about over here? Some of the things you guys learned? You learned how to pirouette. If we had more time, I would ask you to demonstrate, but you're a lucky day. All right, how about in this area? I'm sorry? You learned how to hold a baby. There you go. It's a very important lesson to learn. What else? You learned the bagpipes. Literally in 2 minutes, he learned the bagpipes. That's awesome. How about in this area? French horn? Oh, nice. So how to look up genealogy. Excellent. Family tree. How to make taco soup right before lunch. That sounds really good. And how about in this general area, way back in the back, one back there? Yes. How to make monkey bread, one of my favorites. All right, what about up here? Learn how to play golf. So why do we do this exercise? I call it Tiny Teach. But why do we do it? Absolutely. It doesn't matter if you're the bus driver, you're in IT, you're in HR, you're the teacher, the principal, you're the student, the parent, the community-based organization running the after-school activity. Regardless of your role, your title, your position, we all have something to give. We all have something to learn, right? We're all in moments teachers, and in other moments, we're the students, right? Adam Grant, pretty popular, well-known professor from the University of Pennsylvania, wrote a great book called Give and Take. Give and Take talks about this phenomena behind why do givers tend to be more successful strategic leaders in organizations, both in the for-profit and in the nonprofit world. In his book, he basically researched there's 3 different types of people. There's takers, there's matchers, and there's givers, right? The takers take everything, right? And never really give back. The matchers, it's all about reciprocity. Hey, I'll give you this if you give me that. And the givers give of themselves expecting nothing in return. And the reason why he found that strategic leaders are oftentimes givers is because, and you can write this down in the margins, they focus on 3 things. Relationships. They care about the people inside the body, not what's at the surface. They care about the depth of someone's character and building solid, meaningful relationships with people. 2, they care about being motivated, and the motivation of giving is what drives them, right? So the idea of helping somebody else, that motivation, is one of their biggest drivers that makes them successful in the leadership roles that they take on. And the last one is this sense of learning, a sense of continually learning and growing from every person, every experience that they encounter. It adds a new story to their book, right? Which makes them a deeper, richer person. So through relationships, through the motivation of giving, and at the end of the day, understanding what they're learning is what drives them forward, right? If you flip back a page, for timing, I'm just going to quickly give you a snapshot of this. There's something called the Wheel of Life exercise. The Wheel of Life exercise is something I would totally challenge you guys to do both independently as well as with your teams, and it's fairly simple to do. You basically look at multiple dimensions of your life, whether it's your physical environment, your work environment, your family, your money, whatever it is that's around that circle, right? And you can swap in different categories if you want. You start to look at from 0 at the center of the circle out to 10, ranking where you are in terms of your satisfaction within each of those dimensions, right? So 10 being the most satisfied. You're most satisfied in your job, you're most satisfied with your physical environment, where you live, all of that, right? So you rank all of those different dimensions, and then you connect the dots. And what it challenges us to think about is when you have a perfect circle, the tire that runs on the highway that moves us smoothly down the road, right? We don't run into that many challenges. But when we've got a clogged wheel or a flat tire, we get stuck, right? And we're not able to move ourselves forward. The same is true when we fall out of balance. If we put 16 hours in at work and neglect the people that are at home, right? We're out of balance, and eventually that's going to catch up to us. So how do you change it? What do you do about it, right? The exercise right below it is your opportunity to do something about it. There's 2 characters with 3 lines in between. This is something you can do after this session. On the right character, it's who you want to be, what you want to accomplish, the goal that you want to achieve 6 months from now, right? You want to lose 40 pounds. You want to be a better IT professional. You want to be a better parent. You want to be a better partner, right? So define what your goal is. Then flip back to current reality. Where are you today? If you want that big promotion at work, where are you in terms of the skill set, the professional development that you are at today? Write 3 words down the center of that sheet. The top arrow, write the word stop. The second arrow, write the word start. The third arrow, write the word continue. See, here's the thing. How many of you at any given moment have lots of balls in the air? You're trying to juggle lots of different things. Raise your hand. Right, and then sometimes you drop 1 ball, sometimes you drop 2, sometimes you drop 10, and sometimes you drop them all, right? That's the reality. So oftentimes when doing this exercise, people say, well, I can't stop anything. Right, so if you can't stop anything, you're not going to get anything different, right? You're going to keep adding to your plate, in fact, and you know what's going to happen? Your level of satisfaction in that wheel of life exercise is going to become more and more squished because your level of satisfaction in those various dimensions of your life are going to become more out of balance. But if you can have an honest, transparent conversation with yourself and leverage your influencers around you to really push you hard in what you need to stop doing in order to achieve that goal, you're taking the first big step to getting there. Then you think about what do you need to start doing that you haven't been doing to move you closer towards that objective. You want that promotion, you've got 90% of the skill sets, what are you missing? Find it out and put it on your plan to get that skill set in the next 6 months, right? And then what do you want to continue? What has helped you all along that will continue to help you if you continue to focus on it, right? The reality is that there are lots of people all around us that are in those teaching roles and in those learning roles. So don't be ashamed to raise your hand and say, I don't have X and I need it to get to where I want to be. I need to find the teacher to make that happen, right? Because most likely the teachers are right around you in the environment that you're already in. There was a professor who stood in front of her class and held up a glass of water. And she asked her class, holding up that glass of water, how much do you think this glass of water weighs? She took a few minutes, took a couple of responses from the students, and then she raised her hand and she stopped them and said, it doesn't matter how much the glass weighs. What matters most is how long I hold this glass. I hold it for a minute, doesn't matter. I hold it for an hour, my arm is going to start to hurt. I hold it for 24 hours, my arm will be paralyzed. The same is true in our relationships. If you think about how many of you have heard of the stages of group development? You know, you're forming, you're storming, you're norming, and then you're at that ultimate goal of performing, right? So in your workbooks, the idea of forming, storming, norming, and performing, the same is true with grudges. What happens in 90% of teams is they form, everything's great, everybody's understanding who's around the table at the surface. We start to get to a little bit below the surface, we start to understand our roles, we start to ask lots of questions about what we're trying to achieve, and the storms start coming in. The conflict starts rising, right? And a few things happen. One, we disregard the people behind the words that are at the table. The stories, the values, the experiences of those people, right? And we start hunkering down in our heels and saying, nope, it's got to be this way. I have had experience with this, and I know it's going to work this way. Strategic leaders in those moments challenge as a team, hit the pause button, zoom out, and ask yourself, what are we ultimately trying to achieve here? Are there multiple paths to get to that ultimate goal? And if so, let's be okay with choosing a different path as long as we achieve what we all have bought into as the vision, as the goal, right? Another thing happens in that storming stage that people get stuck in. It's called trust, right? They don't trust the people that are at the table. When you don't trust the people that are at the table, you hold the grudge, right? You hold that water up, and therefore you paralyze your own ability and the ability of the team to be able to move that group forward towards the ultimate goal. And when you do that, same thing is happening. Heels in the ground, hunkering down, no movement. A strategic leader comes in and says, hey, pause button again. Before we can move forward in this task, this project that we've been given, we as a team need to come together and figure out who we all are and how we can best work together. Then and only then can we actually accomplish whatever the tasks are or the projects are that are put on our plate. If we don't have that foundational core of self-awareness and building and sustaining relationships, task after task will come onto our plate and we will get stuck in that storming phase, right? Which leads me to the last part, which is around influence. So if you flip after stages of development to Daniel Pink, To Sell is Human. It's one of his more popular and more recent books. He talks about the fact that there used to be this motto in sales called the ABCs of selling. So as strategic leaders, when groups are in that storming phase, one of your biggest roles is to sell them on doing something different to get over that hurdle, right? 80% of all of us spend the majority of our time selling something. Selling our ideas, selling our kids to make their beds, selling our partner or our spouse to do something different that we don't like, right? We're selling, selling, selling. Instead of the old motto of always be closing the deal of selling, what he found in his research around what makes effective sellers and therefore influencers are, again, 3 different ABCs. The first is attunement. Attunement is practicing empathy. So a strategic leader in moments of storms starts to take a step back and look at everyone around the table and say, what are their value systems again? What were some of their defining moments? Who are some of the influential people in their life? How do I leverage that information that I've gained from building a relationship with that person to help them overcome the challenge or the hurdle that's in our way? Being able to put yourself into someone else's shoes enables you to influence them in a more effective way. B is buoyancy. How many of you have asked your kids to do something and the first response is no? Right? Second response is no way. And the third response is you've got to be kidding me. It ain't going to happen, right? And then eventually you get to a yes. Buoyancy is being able to bounce back from that sea of rejection. When you keep hearing no, you stay committed to getting to yes. Strategic leaders know the direction that an organization or a team needs to go. And as much as people push back, strategic leaders, they give them a little leeway, and then they keep pushing them forward. So even if they take one more step closer in the direction of that goal, they've made progress, right? So A is attunement, B is the idea of buoyancy, and then C is the idea of clarity. Being able to cut through all of the noise and make sure at the end of the day you're clear on the purpose, you're clear on the big picture. So oftentimes teams in that storming phase get stuck in the task that's at hand and forget the big picture of what they're ultimately trying to achieve, right? So attunement, buoyancy, and clarity of purpose. To sell is human, to be able to influence people, right? Right below that, one of the final things that I'll share with you, there's a grid, a matrix, right? All of us, in terms of teams, have worked with a variety of personalities. So bringing this full circle back to the very beginning when I asked you, what are some of the challenges that leaders face, right? Dealing with lots of different personalities. The first, the concept of selling, is you've got to be committed to influencing as a strategic leader and not back down. The second is you need to know as a strategic leader the type of leadership to apply to the individual people that are at the table, right? So what this grid tells you is you're going to have people with great skill sets and little confidence, little motivation. You're going to have people who are fully confident and fully skilled. You're going to have people that don't have a lot of confidence but have a tremendous amount of skills, right? And as a strategic leader, one size doesn't fit all, right? As a strategic leader, it's taking a step back and saying, you know what, Bobby's got great confidence, but he hasn't gotten the skills yet to accomplish the task that I've been trying to give him. So with Bobby, I've got to guide him more in gaining the skills that are going to be necessary to achieve the goal. Whereas somebody else on the opposite end who has little confidence, but has tremendous amount of skill in being able to accomplish the task, your role as a strategic leader is to excite and energize and inspire them, and to show them deep down within that they have what it takes to achieve whatever they put their mind to. You flip the workbook over Terry Barber wrote a book called The Inspiration Factor. When you think about the priorities of Fairfax County Public Schools and the strategic leadership that's necessary to achieve those, right? The idea of having a caring community, the idea of having a premier workforce that doesn't just attract great talent, but retains great talent. When you think about the idea of the student success, setting students up for that path to achieve whatever they put their minds to, all of those things require people to be inspired along the way and not get caught up in the sort of day-to-day mundane routine that oftentimes people get stuck in, right? So what Terry Barber researched is, what is it that creates an inspiring workforce? And she came up with a very, very simple equation. And it goes like this. You need to notice, name, and nurture. Notice, name, and nurture. You need to notice when somebody is living up to their strengths. You need to notice when somebody has pushed beyond the comfort level they thought they had. You need to notice when someone exceeds expectations. You need to name it. You need to tell them, privately, in a staff meeting, through some formal or informal recognition strategy, name that accomplishment. Give them credit for playing to their strengths, for achieving something that 2 weeks ago they didn't think was possible. And then you need to nurture it. You need to hang on to that win by its coattails and continue to nurture it. Someone delivers an amazing presentation in front of your department head, you name it, and you nurture it. And you give them another opportunity to present. Somebody delivers an amazing report for you that exceeds your expectations, you name it, and you give them the next challenge that takes what they just accomplished and takes it one step further. As strategic leaders, when you notice, you name, and you nurture, you help people to be the best version of themselves, which gives them permission to be their most authentic selves at work. And when you think about when you're the happiest, when you gain the most energy, it's when you're the most authentic version of who you are, right? I end the same way with all presentations. Ken Robinson, who I'm sure many of you have heard of before, used this in one of his most popular TED Talks. He talks about Death Valley out west. Death Valley being very dry, very barren. Talks about in fall of 2004, an unprecedented amount of rain fell in Death Valley, and it transformed the valley to the image that's on the screen, to this amazing wildflower display across Death Valley. And he shared the following remarks. Death Valley isn't dead, it's dormant. And right beneath the surface are these seeds of possibilities waiting for the right conditions to come about. If the conditions are right, life is inevitable. You see, the real role of leadership is not about command and control. The real role of leadership, of strategic leadership, is about climate control. Creating a climate where people discover on a continual basis who they are and can be comfortable being themselves. A climate of possibility in which relationships are not just built, but they're managed and they're sustained in a meaningful and effective way. And a climate of possibility at the end of the day in which we are influencing each other to be the best version of ourselves and the best version of our district so that we can achieve the big picture goal, which is to set up all of the students that come through this district for the best success possible. I know you guys are up for that challenge, and I wish you a tremendous amount of luck in getting there. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Community Keynotes Strategic Leadership with Daniel Horgan. For more information on the Community Keynotes series or other great programs from the Fairfax Network, go to the Fairfax Network website.